I am live. Today is the 16th of September 2024 and I continue Many Lifetimes, Chapter 6. It's an account of Dennis Kelsey, who is in collaboration with Joan Marshall Grant in this book. She passed away in 1989. And I stopped, I think it was the third reading actually. It's quite a long chapter. Where he describes his own aversion to put any horses into discomfort, which came from a previous incarnation. The incident of recalling a fragment of my own long history was soon followed by my first experience of handling an episode from a patient's earlier life without Joan's help. At this period, she was not working with me as a routine because she was finishing a book which had been commissioned before our meeting. The patient was a highly cultured professional man in his mid-40s who, since puberty, had been exclusively homosexual. In retrospect, it is surprising that in a case of this nature I did not moot the possibility of reincarnation at an early stage, but there are two reasons why I did not do so. First, as I cannot emphasize too often or too strongly, recognition that the current life is but the most recent of many, is by no means a panacea. In the majority of cases, the root of a neurosis lies in the present, can be found in the present, and can be resolved in the present. Therefore, except in unusual instances, it would be foolish to omit a scrutiny of the patient's existing circumstances, and to understand these fully, a consideration of his childhood is sometimes unavoidable. Second, during our initial interview, this patient had declared that he was a staunch upholder of Orthodox Church of England doctrine, and from this I inferred that he might find the idea of reincarnation unacceptable. Success in therapy seldom depends upon a patient sharing this belief, and many treatments run their course without the concept being mentioned. But needless conflict evoked by introducing this highly controversial issue, when it is not necessary, can delay rather than accelerate the process. So the first 13 sessions were devoted to exploring his present life, both with and without the aid of hypnosis. But I found nothing of sufficient emotional significance to account for the compulsive drive which caused him to seek a male companion as the only way of assuaging his loneliness. This loneliness was the core of his problem, for however long and arduously he tried to cure himself by being ascetic, his self-imposed solitude eventually became intolerable. Then he would enter into yet another of the relationships which, as he expressed it, seemed foredoomed to failure, and to leave me lonelier than ever. At the 14th session he arrived in a state of acute agitation, due to the fact that since we had last met he had moved into a new apartment, and within 2 days had found himself strongly attracted to a young man living in the same building. I induced the hypnosis with the intention of telling him to try to pinpoint what aspect of this particular young man made him seem so desirable. But instead, I found myself saying, "See who is causing you to have these feelings." Within seconds, he had begun to describe episodes from a life in which he had been the Hittite wife of the governor of the foreigners who have invaded my country. The marriage was at first exceedingly satisfactory, for she lived in unaccustomed luxury, and was fawned upon by sycophants who knew that her husband often turned to her for advice. Then he received orders which would entail his absence from his headquarters for some considerable time, and by overruling his objections she was able to accompany him. By questions concerning the direction of the march, the character of the terrain, and the number of days which elapsed between the various periods when the army went into temporary encampment, I tried to gain information about the scope and aims of this campaign. Perhaps if my patient had been recalling his experiences as a soldier, he would have retained this kind of data, But the woman he had been remembered only the discomforts she had suffered on this seemingly interminable journey, the aches and fevers, the heat and the boredom, the dust storms and the sandflies. When I asked, how long did the journey last? The reply was, far, far longer than I had anticipated. The hardships which I was forced to endure destroyed my health and my beauty, and then my husband came no more to my tent to visit me. When she reached home, her bitterness increased. Her husband no longer asked her advice, nor did he bother to conceal that neither her thoughts nor her body aroused his interest. Already acutely jealous, she became obsessed with hatred when she discovered that she had been supplanted not by another woman, but by a handsome boy. This final humiliation caused her to steal her husband's dagger so that it could become the object on which to focus the energy of a curse. I took it to a priest of Baal and paid him much gold to curse the owner of the dagger. May everything he finds sweet become bitter. May everyone he lives for die. I asked, when did you die? He cried out, I was soon murdered. I was stabbed. As he was obviously in considerable emotional distress, I brought him back to the present and out of hypnosis. He retained a clear memory of everything he had recounted, and I asked him to give an opinion of the woman's character. He exclaimed, she was a terrible creature. She did not love her husband, even at the beginning. She only coveted the prestige that marriage to him would bring. She did not go with him on his journey because she wanted to share his hardships. She went only to prove to him that he could not do without her, that although a woman she was stronger even than he. Her jealousy was wicked enough, but to inflict a curse upon him was an unforgivable sin. Knowing that he was truly devout, I said to him, imagine that you are a priest. Imagine that a woman has confessed this story to you. She understands the nature and the magnitude of her transgressions, and has resolved never to act in this way again. What would you say to this woman? He replied without hesitation, I would give her absolution. So I asked him to absolve the woman who was part of his total self. He kneeled in prayer. Of the form of his prayers I know nothing, but even from my chair on the other side of the room I could feel the beneficial energy which was flowing from him. Oh dear, I wonder when it went blind. Well, I'm at the end, and I didn't see it. The battery was empty, so I don't know how much I'm missing out. I'm just taking a stab here. When Dennis asked the man, what would you say to a woman who came to you with this magnitude of transgressions? And he replied without hesitation, I would give her absolution. So I asked him to absolve the woman who was part of his total self. He knelt in prayer. Of the form of his prayers I know nothing, but even from my chair on the other side of the room I could feel the beneficial energy which was flowing from him. At length he rose to his feet, and I saw that the drawn, anxious expression on his face, with which I had become so familiar, had changed to a serene contentment. He said, I knew it is finished. I know it. I am no longer homosexual. He came to see me some weeks later, but only to confirm that he was free, and he knew he would remain so. Then I did not hear from him for 4 years. His letter contained the sentence, the cure, by the way, through far memory, and what I can only regard as your exorcism, has been effective indeed, and I have found myself able to enter a wholly satisfactory heterosexual relationship. Right, next chapter is The Age of Perception by Joan Marshall Grant.